Hello and welcome back to Snack TCG for another Junk Magic deck spotlight. Today we've got a blue Humans and Wings deck, or Feathers and Humans is what I'm calling it. And what we do is I'm going to show you the showcase cards, the ones I think stand out in this deck for this format of play. And yeah, we talk about strategy, synergy, and then I show you the stats at the end, and you can see the numbers for yourself. And if you like the deck, you like some of the cards, you want some for your own, or you want to try the game yourself, feel free to shoot me an email, leave a comment saying that you're interested in the deck, and I'd be happy to sell it to you. Anyway, we're going to start things off with a little chat. Now, a little chat is one of the card draw / kind of melee cards in this deck. It has casualty 1, so as you cast a spell, you can sacrifice a creature with power 1 or greater. So if you have like a token, or you have like just some of the little guys, you can sacrifice one of those, and you can cast the spell again. You can look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand and the other in the bottom of your library. I love this mechanic. I love being able to put things on the bottom of my library if I'm not ready for them. That's why I always mulligan, at least a little bit. Next up, Delay. Instant counter target spell. If the spell is countered this way, exile it with 3 time counters on it instead of putting it into its owner's graveyard. If it doesn't have suspend, it gains suspend. I love the suspend mechanic. Honestly, it's fun. Suspend, foretell, anything where I can put something on the side and it'll come into play when I want it to. When I'm able to do that against an opponent, say you delay a counter spell that they played. Now what? In 3 turns, it'll cast for nothing. It's a great card. It's an absolutely great card. And there's there's one card, Time Bender, that combos with this delay card very well. This is also a $2.52 card, I believe, as far as Card Kingdom is concerned. Very, very good card. Next up, Ali Rios, Enraptured. It's a legendary creature. It enters the battlefield tapped and doesn't untap during your untap step if you control a reflection. What you do as well is when he enters the battlefield, you create a 2/3 blue reflection token, or a 3/2 blue reflection creature token. This is a 2/3, his reflection is a 3/2. It's great. You get 2 for the price of 1, which is always great. Sure, he doesn't untap during your untap step, but there are ways around that where you can have him in combat, especially in this deck if you get the right cards. Next up, Meneldor, Swift Savior, flying. Whenever Meneldor, Swift Savior, deals combat damage to a player, exile up to 1 target creature you own, then return it to the battlefield under your control. This is great if you've got a card on the playfield where it says, like, for example, when this enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on any creature with flying. You put this out, you send it to exile, you bring it right back, you get a second +1/+1 counter on all of your flying spells. Super, super, super useful mechanic. Next up, Mystical Teachings. Search your library for an instant card or a card with flash. Reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. This also has a flashback cost of 5 of any color and 1 black mana. So you can use that flashback in approximately 25% of the games you're playing, unless you get a treasure token that you can use. This is really, really useful because I love the flash mechanic. A lot of creatures with flash, you literally wait until the end of your opponent's turn, cast it for the flash cost. Now it's on the battlefield, and say you have a creature card that enters the battlefield tapped, but it has flash. Flash it in on your opponent's turn, and then you get that mana right back at the end of the turn. Super useful card, especially if you've got something in mind that you put into your deck in the game that this comes out. It can really be a game changer. Next up, Escape Protocol. Whenever you cycle a card, you may pay 1. When you do, exile target artifact or creature you control, then return it to the battlefield under its own owner's control. Again, same with that Meneldor card, is that this will allow you to get those procs one more time. Super, super useful. Plus, whenever you cycle a card, I've said before, I love the cycle mechanic because I love card draw. Anything that has cycle is basically just a sorcery spell that says pay this many mana of any color or a specific color and draw a card. Super, super useful if you have something that you're not ready to use or not wanting to use. Even more useful if you have a card that lets you return it to your hand or to the battlefield in that game. Very good card. Next up, we have Winged Words. This is a common that I'm showing off because I think it's exceptionally good in this deck. Winged Words, this spell costs 1 less to cast if you control a creature with flying. Draw 2 cards. Now, why is this so useful? Because this deck that I've built is 39.47% flying. So about 39.47% of the time, in theory, you will be able to play this card for 1 less, and it allows you to draw 2 cards. Massive. Becomes a 2-drop, massive. Next up, we have Whip Spine Drake. This is a card that's decent, especially in the context of this format. It's a 5-drop that's 3/3 with flying. It's decent. Its real specialty is that morph cost, but in this format, that morph cost is only coming out when you're playing, I believe, like Azorius, which is going to happen in a quarter of the games that you play, at least 2-player-wise. It's good. It's decent. You can just outright cast it for 3 for its morph cost to be a 2/2 creature with no flying. I think it's got better uses, but the flavor kind of fit this deck better than the other blue decks I was building. So, Yoreth of the Healing House. Again, not a huge Lord of the Rings guy, but this lady is a 1/4 for a 3-drop, and it lets you either untap another target permanent or untap 2 other target legendary creatures. So you can use this lady if you have her in conjunction with that flipping the guy falling asleep at the reflection who doesn't untap during your turn. If you have a reflection on the field, which you do when he comes out, this lady will let you untap him. Sure, you can attack, but then you have to redo it. So its usefulness is decent, but you know, it makes a 1/4 into a 2/3. That's more damage on average. Next up, we have Reconnaissance Mission. This is another card on Card Kingdom that's worth a pretty decent amount more than the base value of cards. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. It's an enchantment. That's awesome. That's awesome. How many times are you dealing damage to a player? I don't know, but you can also cycle this card. This is either an enchantment for 4 or a draw 1 card for 2. Very, very versatile card. Again, love the cycling mechanic. Next up, Jeskai Elder, a human monk with prowess, which will get +1/+1 until the end of turn whenever you cast a non-creature spell. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. So you can combo this with the Reconnaissance Mission enchantment, and you get extra cards. And then you have more choice as to what you can discard. It's a good card. Not as good as that Reconnaissance Mission, but still all right. Next up, we have Neutralize. Counter target spell with cycling. Extremely useful again. This is a very, very useful card because it's counter target spell without any drawback. It doesn't say counter target creature spell, counter target artifact, counter target instant sorcery. It's just branching. You can counter whatever you want with this card. Not only that, if you're not in a place where you're worried about countering, you can cycle it for 1 less mana and draw a card. Very, very useful. Capture Sphere. Another common that I've put in this showcase video because it has flash. And when Capture Sphere enters the battlefield, tap enchanted creature. Enchanted creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. You just, it's got flash. You've saved up 4 mana because you're kind of late game. This is one of the last cards in your deck. Your opponent plays a creature and you enchant it. Or you do it right when they're about to attack so that they can't do anything. Or right before. However you want to play it. But it's nice because you can play your turn, cast it for the flash value, and then get that mana back. Very, 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 very good. Time Bender. It's Morph, which you can pay. Doesn't say how many you can pay to, flip it, but I guess 1 blue. That's kind of weird. I guess. When it's turn face up, You can either choose to remove 2 time counters from target permanent or suspended card, or put 2 time counters on target permanent with a time counter on it or suspend card. So you can use this in conjunct with that delay, and you can add a couple more turns onto whatever spell you're trying to delay. Not only that, there's 2 of them in this deck. So you're twice as likely to find it as any based card. Next up, Sage of Mysteries, Constellation. It's a human wizard. Whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, target player puts the top 2 cards of their library into the graveyard. It's a mill card. You play enchantments. If you want to put more enchantments in here, it gets exponentially better. Right now, as this library stands as a base library, it's alright. It's not the greatest, but hey, you know, you get to mill things. That's always fun. And it's a 1-drop, which is extra good. Of One Mind, another common card, but this one's in here in this spotlight because this spell costs 2 less to cast if you control a human creature and a non-human creature. And when you have a library that's 114 cards that has 31 human cards and 26 non-human cards, you are able to actually get this card for a 1-drop fairly reliable. And for a 1-drop where you can draw 2 cards, even a 3-drop where you can draw 2 cards, that's like the standard for drawing 2 cards in 1 turn, and it doesn't have any drawbacks. I'm surprised that this card is a common, if I'm being honest, because that's like uncommon level, if you ask me. Next up, Joint Exploration. It's got a kicker of 1 forest. Scry 2, then draw a card. If this spell is kicked, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. So, it's cool. It's nice. I love scrying. Then you get to draw a card, so you get to know what you're drawing pretty much, unless both cards on top are just kind of garbage, then it's a blind draw, who cares? But if you're playing a Simic deck, or a Simic game, which will happen about a quarter of the time if you're playing blue or green, but this is a blue deck, so let's focus on that. You get to also put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield, allowing you to play 2 lands in 1 turn. Great, super versatile. Portal Mage. Flash. When Portal Mage enters the battlefield during the declare attacker step, you may reselect which player or permanent target attacking creature is attacking. So this is a great card if you're playing an opponent who likes to do the whole, all right, you need to choose your blockers. I need you to choose your blockers. And then as soon as you choose your blockers, they start trying to cast a bunch of instants or whatever. Then you can just, flash this guy out, choose different blockers that make more sense, and then you've just completely bamboozled him. And this game's all about bamboozling, especially blue decks. Wingspan Mentor. It's a human wizard. When Wingspan Mentor enters the battlefield, put a flying counter on target non-human creature you control. There's not a lot of non-human creatures in this deck that don't have flying, specifically the Winged Pterodon, I believe, does that. But, when you pay 3 mana and you tap it, you can put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control with flying. And again, when you have a deck that consists of 39.5% flying cards, you're adding a lot of +1/+1 counters on that battlefield when you've got it out. Very, very useful in my opinion. Next up, we have Illusionary Armor, a 5-drop. Enchanted creature gets +4/+4. When enchanted creature becomes the target of a spell or an ability, sacrifice Illusionary Armor. This is a very, very mid card. It's a 5-drop. Sure, that +4/+4 is huge in the moment. But then as soon as your opponent casts a spell on that creature, you lose that +4/+4, and you've pretty much wasted that 5 mana. I mean, sure, you get that 1 turn of +4/+4, maybe 2 turns if you're lucky. I just think this card could be better, and I think there's better options in this deck to search for. And last but certainly not least, Warden of the Evos Isle. Flying. Creature spells with flying you cast cost 1 less to cast. Again, huge in this deck. We're looking at 39.5% of all the cards in this deck having flying. And you're telling me if you get this guy for a 3-drop and put him on the field, then all your flying guys come in for cheaper? That's so good. That's so freaking good. Anyway, now is where we take a look at the stats. So this library is 3761. The cards are based on how effective I think they are. Most of the cards in this deck were not shown in this video because I tried that once and the video footage was over an hour and I don't want to edit that. But 3761, when you take into account that there's a $252 card and one other card that's almost a buck, plus 114 when we're dealing with mostly on average about 35-cent cards, you know, pretty relatively fair with Card Kingdom, and then an extra 10% off the top. Just as a, hey, this is a starter deck for you to work on and build. Great. Now, we've got 26.32% instants, 11.40% sorceries, 12.28% enchantments, 50% creatures across the board. I didn't plan that, that's just how it happened. 27.19% of those creatures are human. 22.81% of those creatures are not human. 39, well, I guess it would be multiplied by 2. So it's like, I don't know, 54.4% are humans, and then 45, roughly, 45 and a half are non-human. 39.47 of the entirety of this 114 cards are flying. 31.58%. And this is flying either as like their primary thing, they come inherently with flying, or it's a boost to flying. It's flying synergy. 31.58% card draw, 10.53% counter, 7.02% mill, 14.04% flash, 11.4% return to sender, and 10.53% tap don't untap. I'd like to say thank you for watching. If you're still around, please, if you like this concept, you want to learn more about Junk Magic, the newest format that I created that I want to build up because I think it's the most pure, ultimate version of tournament-style Magic the Gathering, arena-style that's ever existed, please subscribe, like the video, maybe leave a comment. Tell me about how cool you think the Warden of Evil-Asile is. Or Timebender. Or Of One Mind. Any of the cards. Or you can say the cards were mid. I'll accept that. Anyway, have a great day and thank you for watching.